The logistics world was rocked this spring, and although there were many challenges, there was some also unexpected positive outcomes. For example, many fleet owners were able to try out new chassis equipment instead of the older, aging pool of chassis they've been leasing. In this episode, I'm going to talk with Doug Hoehn at Milestone. In this conversation, we're going to discuss the chassis role in logistics, the current environment of the machine, and how Milestone found a solution to a common issue. So, to start off, I'm going to bring Doug on. Doug, how's it going?
Good morning.
So, Doug, you have a really interesting background. Let's start with that. Tell the audience a little bit about yourself and kind of your experience in transportation and logistics.
Sure. I've actually been in the industry a little over 30 years. Went straight out of college, worked for one of the ocean carriers for a number of years, started as a sales guy, went up through the management ranks, went overseas for a couple of years, worked as an expat, and came back and decided that it was time to try something different. Went into equipment leasing back in the late 90s and been in it ever since.
Awesome. It's a fun little 30 years in this industry. It's we have a lot of that on our staff too. It's crazy how long people stay within this industry. But for
People move around, don't go away though.
Yeah, I know. It's so great. It's one of those because I recently just joined, so I'm kind of learning about it. I'm like, oh, geez, you guys all have so much experience. How do I jump on with that? But it's fun talking to the people. And it's the thing I've kind of started to learn is a lot of people know what they know, but they're unfamiliar with other elements of it. So let's talk about that other element, at least for what I'm seeing when I talk to people, is chassis. And for those unfamiliar with it, what are they? How are they used in transportation?
So a chassis is basically that a container gets put on when it comes off of the ship. So, think about it. You need a chassis to be able to either, if it comes off of the train or if it comes off of the ship, in order to be delivered to the end customer or a warehouse, it has to go on a set of wheels, and that's the chassis. It's a very simple piece of equipment, but one that's certainly caused a lot of issues over the last number of years.
And how do shippers go about securing this form of transportation? Is it calling the port? Is it calling is there companies? How does it all work?
So the industry's actually changed quite a bit over the last number of years. If you were anywhere else in the world, the truckers secure chassis by owning them or leasing them from someone, and they bring the chassis into the port and they pick up a container. For some reason, the U.S. over the last number of years, the ocean carriers actually provided chassis to the truckers. But really, in the last 10 years, that's started to change. The ocean carriers have changed that model, trying to get back to the way they operate in the rest of the world. Chassis are either available through pools of equipment that are available at the ports or at a railhead, or they can lease or they can own a piece of equipment. So we're in the leasing business. We also provide daily rentals as well at offsite facilities. But we created a little bit different model specifically for the trucking industry than people would have been used to in the past.
Now let's talk a little bit about that, because that model is kind of the big kind of the aha moment you guys sort of had. But I think the big thing that was sort of interesting to me is what I was described as the chassis really aren't replaced. These are old machinery. Am I correct?
Yes. I mean, the average company will depreciate a piece of equipment over about 20 to 22 years. That's the depreciable life of the asset. But over the last number of years, some of the other equipment providers have taken to either refurbing or remacking equipment, and that's two completely different processes. But it is a way to extend the life of the asset. And the most common was to refurbish a chassis lately, and that's really where they just basically repaint the chassis, change out some of the componentry on it, maybe put some LED lights on it to make it a little more modern, but you're still running the original axle on that chassis. And in that case, we're talking about chassis that may already have been 20 years old, Many didn't or don't have ABS, which is something that there is actually mandated for new chassis to have. And I don't think any of us are driving a car that doesn't have ABS on it. So we basically started to build new equipment, um, um, and we're able to do that and put it into service, directly through leasing, or through daily rentals that we were able to put together at off-site facilities close to the ports or close to the rail.
It's interesting. I mean, why aren't chassis updated as much as something as like a regular truck? Is it just it's not getting as much wear and tear, or what's the reason behind kind of just
Yeah,
throwing a paint job on?
I mean, the different equipment providers have different reasons. I mean, obviously, if you can stretch out the life of an asset by putting some money into it, then that makes all the sense in the world. We do that on our trailer business as well. But we've just made a conscious decision, our investors and the people as we went into this business, that the fleet needed to be updated. We needed newer assets in the marketplace, and the pricing was close enough that we could do that. And the difference, say in a per diem rate, it was more expensive for a new piece of equipment, was offset by the savings in maintenance and repair that the customer had, plus the fact that they didn't have to worry that a trailer with an old bias ply recap tire had blown out going down the highway. I mean, if you've ever driven down the highway and see pieces of rubber flying around in the highway, you know that obviously that's not a very safe thing. But as well, that means you got a driver now sitting on the side of the highway waiting for road service. All of our equipment is equipped with radial wheels, radial tires. They're all no recaps. It's all brand new. Tires are also hub piloted disc wheels, which would look just like the wheel on your car. No two-piece 5-spoke wheels that wobble. So those are just some real simple things that were changes in the design that we brought forth. And I think it's also kind of pushed some of the other providers to change the way that they're doing business and start to invest and put some of those things into the equipment today too. So it's the right thing for the industry.
Yeah, I think one of the big things that I was kind of reading about, or the big issue, I mean, we're seeing it kind of everywhere in the Oakland and the Port of LA. These breakdowns are more catastrophic now because of certain market conditions going around. What are some of the issues? Why are stuff like breakdowns, stranded drivers, things like that? Why are they particularly concerning given the effects of coronavirus? That especially what coronavirus has had on the industry lately.
Well, I mean, I take coronavirus and just set it aside for 1 second. The industry as a whole has gone through a lot of difficulties, and the coronavirus and the drops in uh, volumes that went along with that had a huge impact on the trucking industry, and a huge impact on anybody in business anywhere. So you had that, but that you had to put on top of the fact that a lot of those truckers and a lot of the ocean carriers and the warehouses and retailers are still reeling from having tariffs put in place last year. So, they were already had faced down business cycles, and then to have this thrown on top of it, it was just that much more difficult. So, you need as much efficiency as possible. A driver with their limited hours of service that they've got, a company can't afford their driver to lose 2 or 3 hours sitting on the side of the road, not being productive and not making a delivery. So, in some of the cases where these drivers used to make, say, 2 different deliveries in a day, or even out in the Southeast where it was difficult because of the distance from the port where they were running, say, into Charleston or Savannah out of the middle of Georgia or out in Alabama. If they have a breakdown, they may not even be able to get their one turn in a day. And that's very, very important to these guys. They need the dependability and the predictability that they're going to be able to perform as they need to perform.
Absolutely. So let's turn this conversation into what I mean, aside from Corona, right? These are issues. They need to perform. They don't. Unfortunately, the speed of business doesn't give you the opportunity to have any delay anymore. The customers always want it now, regardless of B2B or B2C. So, what major change did Milestone undergo during Corona? How did you guys seize the opportunity?
Well, I think one of the big things that we really had to address and make sure was, we were dealing with a lot of customers that were feeling a lot of pain. People who had leased equipment, people who had been making payments, whose business just simply dried. One of our customers in particular, for a period of time, their business was off 40 to 60% because they were pulling a lot of automotive industry business that simply dried up during that period. The plants were closed down, or manufacturing for the parts were closed down, so they couldn't deliver. So these are people that had real everyday problems that they needed to be able to either have some flexibility in what they had from an equipment standpoint. So it's where we really started to work with customers. Some of the customers converted some of their leases and put them on short-term leases. We have a product that's called chassisfinder.com. It's an online booking system that allows people to book daily rentals as well as short-term rentals. And so we allowed customers a lot more flexibility and to be able to use that product rather than having to go and sign for a long-term lease. Typically we're bringing a new piece of equipment in. We're looking for at least 3 years commitment on that equipment when we bring it in. So gave people a little bit more flexibility that allowed them to, take their fleet up when they needed it, take it down when they needed to. And that helped customers, quite honestly, over the last month, after 3 or 4 months of really, I would call it treading water, where we had a lot of equipment idle sitting around, as did all of our competitors. The business has started to pick back up now. There has been a back to school rush, and I think you're starting to see some very large volumes hitting. We've seen it for the last number of weeks on the West Coast. It's now hitting the East Coast as well. So it's now all of a sudden Chassis Finder's busy as can be because everybody is rushing back to pick up equipment and get it back out the gate. So we continued to repair equipment and keep it good order, have it available so that when this happened, people were able to react quickly and get equipment back on hire and keep their deliveries going without having to wait to get a chassis.
What's been the reaction to shippers for this? I mean, like you said, you guys spotted those. There was plenty, like it just wasn't, there was no business. So how have they reacted now that business is picking up? Especially because you read of how much there is a capacity crunch within chassis. How is everyone kind of responding? And then also talk a little bit about the fact that you guys are upgrading your systems. You do have newer equipment out on the road, which kind of right now when people it's breaking down, like how the hell did it break down? You have 4 months, you had 5-6 months to fix this stuff. How has that response been?
Well, I mean, look, one of the reasons that we originally put Chassis Finder together and started that business up was because we figured that if customers were able to try out the equipment, so you're used to the customer, the chassis that they have. And if they had the ability to try it out short term, they would like it. They would understand the advantages of it. And then they were able to go ahead and take a piece of equipment on longer term. So it was just part of our strategy to start with. It's been a good strategy. I think the Chassis Finder guys every month get a little upset when they see their numbers go up and down, and they go up and down, which is normal because of daily rentals. But it's also exacerbated by the fact that a lot of customers take it on. They'll keep it on for 60 or 90 days. They like the equipment, and then they'll turn around and sign a term lease for it, and it comes out of chassis finance. So, I think it's fit the right mold for a lot of truckers. There's still challenges, a lot of challenges. We're not on port in a lot of these facilities. We're very close, or we're operating in facilities that are right next to the port. Places like Newark, where it doesn't really matter. We're in the same yard that the pools operate out of now, because the chassis are no longer on the ports. Those things are really great, and then those are the places where we've really been able to get customers to understand that they can pick up a better piece of equipment than the standard pool chassis and get it in the same location. They're not having to go out of route to get it. But there's other places where, in fact, they do need to go out of route, and we're trying to make that as painless as possible. Make sure that they're not having to pay a big out of route fee to go pick up the equipment.
I love it. It sounds, it's you guys spotted kind of what that issue is, right? You're not understanding chassis, afraid to sign to a long-term lease. You guys were able to not only upgrade your equipment, but then give the actual user how they would want to experience this. It sounds awesome. I love it. I'm going to give you one last question. What's on the horizon for Milestone? What are you guys kind of planning out? What are you guys kind of doing? I mean, right now, I'm sure it's just chaos, just knowing kind of all this everything that's happening. But what are you guys thinking about long-term?
Yeah, it is chaos right now. As you go into peak, it's always chaos. And, there's a lot of things that affect it. I mean, the ship owners canceled a lot of sailings this year. They consolidated a lot of sailings. And obviously when you do that, that causes bunching of all the containers arriving at one time. You got problems that in some of these bigger terminals like in LA and Long Beach, where the ship comes into one terminal, but they want you to return the empty and the chassis to a different place. That dislocates chassis. It makes it more difficult for customers. We see that kind of stuff continuing, especially in these times where business has a sudden spike to it, because a lot of those chassis from the ports were moved off site and they're being repaired and need to be brought back into the system today. Milestone, we're continuing to invest in the business. We'll continue to build equipment. We had quite a lot of inventory left at the end of last year from moving a lot of chassis in before the tariffs hit. So we pretty much moved through all that inventory now. One of the things that's going to become a challenge for a lot of people is going to be the capacity to build chassis, having enough capacity. There's a US ITC filing hanging out there right now to try to put some big duties on imported chassis, and that's where most of the volume is coming from right now. So we're constantly looking around at where we can build, get the best quality equipment. Want to make sure that it's equipment that's going to last for the long term. It's not a new piece of equipment forever, so you got to make sure that you're speccing it right, putting the right parts into it, as well as the type of finish that goes into the equipment that we're building right now. So we'll continue to upgrade that and make sure that that's available. We're continuing to invest in Chassis Finder and looking for ways to make that better for customers. And the one thing that we continue to grow a lot is specialty equipment. So it's not standard, not just the 20 or a 40-foot chassis. We have triaxles, we have 20-40 combos that allow people to carry one 40-foot container that's loaded, or one 20-foot container loaded, but it'll also allow you to carry two 20s empty. So, if you're a trucker and you're taking a 40-foot load into the port, with that piece of equipment, even if you've got to pull a 20-foot piece of equipment out that afternoon, you can use the same chassis and keep it. So we're investing a lot in that. Lightweight chassis that are very much in use with the resin manufacturers right now. So we're looking at a lot of those trends and making sure that we've got the right equipment in the right places.
Well, Doug, honestly, there's a ton of other things we probably could go in, but I know your time's valuable. I know how crazy it is right now. So I'll let you go. Before I let you go, what's the best place an audience can kind of reach you guys at, other than kind of going to Chassis Finder and using the tool? What's a way that they can reach you and kind of get in contact with you?
You can always find any of our numbers through our website, which is www.milecorp.com. And you can reach me easily there's a link to our office, which is here in Lombard, Illinois. We've got a team of salespeople around the U.S. that they can also contact, but feel free to reach out to me, Doug.Hoehn@milecorp.com as well.
Doug, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Have a great day. And that's our show. Have a question about chassis? Ask it in the comment section and we'll be sure to get an answer. In the meantime, subscribe and share our show. Thanks for watching Consulting Logistics. I'm Kyle McNaught. Rock and roll.